Hello, welcome to this video. And today I want to talk about the ebbs and the flows of creativity and how sometimes the ebbs are as important as the flows, and that sometimes our fallow periods are as important as our productive periods. And I think it can be very helpful to think about art making as if we were growing a garden, and that in any season in nature there are times when you're planting seeds, there's times when you're tending the garden, there's times of abundance and harvest, and then there's times of fallowness where everything is dormant and sleeping. And for me, my creativity seems to ebb and flow a little bit like the seasons in a garden. There are times of great abundance and harvest, and then there's times that are much more fallow where I don't seem to be creating all that much. But I think one really supports the other, and I just wanted to share an idea with you that I find really helpful, and it's the idea of the fertile void. This is really an idea from Gestalt therapy, and it's the idea that the spaces in between our kind of transitions can be really powerful and can contain magic. And when I apply this to my own art making, so the idea of the fertile void, it's the spaces in between productivity that can actually really assist and power my seasons of creativity. And so rather than stressing too much about the fact that I may not be kind of creating a lot at any one time, I really try and think about the idea of that fertile void. How can I prepare the ground? How can I nurture and enrich the soil? How can I tend the garden of my creativity? So I've just finished a series of paintings, and I find that when I've just finished a series of paintings, there's this sort of space and this gap where I'm not sure what's next. And it's a little bit like one aspect of my creativity feels a bit spent, and I need to top up the well, and I need to feed and nurture and encourage my creativity so that I can go on and create the next thing. And so I think the kind of fertile void is the space between these areas of productivity. It's the sort of gaps in between. And the gaps in between are really important in paintings, actually. If you think about the composition of a painting, there's such a thing as the negative space, is the space in between the shapes or the forms and the elements. And the space around objects or whatever it is we're painting is as important as the objects themselves. And I think that can be really helpful to apply to art making. So the space in between our creativity is as important as the times when we are really actively creating. And so what I find is that when I've just finished a series of paintings, I then have to let ideas percolate, and I have to give myself space and permission to play and experiment and read and seek and fill my creative well, really. For me, I find that I can't always just be pouring out of my creative well. I need to top it up. And so in the sort of spaces in between, I find it really helpful to write and to reflect and to look back at what I've already created and see what's calling to me. And there's a sort of this gathering stage where I'm thinking, what is going to excite me next? What is the next thing that's going to feel all consuming and interesting to me? And not worry too much, actually, about the gaps in between my creativity. And quite often I'll have a period of pause or a space in between creating, and just allow myself the time to re-find what I'm excited about and to find the next thing. So particularly when one thing has ended and before another thing begins. So when one series of paintings has been completed and before I start on the next series of paintings, there's like a kind of bridge, there's a gap, there's a space, this fertile void that I have to then think, what am I interested in? What's calling to me? How can I nurture and nourish my own creativity? Even just asking yourself, what would nurture my creativity, is a really interesting question. And I often find it's reading, it's looking at other artists' work, it's journaling, it's looking back at my sketchbooks. And sometimes I have to kind of top up the well rather than pour out from it. And then if I do that, I find the thread, I find the thing that's interesting me, I find the next line of inquiry, and then I can kind of start again, refreshed and renewed and excited. And we have to embrace that fertile void. And I love the term the fertile void because I think it is so descriptive. It is saying that yes, there's a gap, there's a space, there's an emptiness, but it's also a fertile space and gap and emptiness. And that sometimes that pause, that transition time, that space in between, that negative space is an important part of the creative process, an important part of the creative journey, for me anyway. And I used to worry about these times when I wasn't being productive and I wasn't, making lots of new work. But now I think I'm a little bit kinder to my own creative ebbs and flows, recognizing that my energy is up and down, and doing things that will support and nurture my creativity. So not abandoning it, but really thinking, how can I plant seeds? How can I water those seeds? How can I prepare for the next season? So the ebbs and the flows of creativity.